Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation with Alex Ramos and Jackie Richardson. Make sure you check them out on Facebook. Also by betdsi.eu, which you can go to betdsi.eu and get a 100% cash back bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000. So make sure you check them out at betdsi.eu. You can also get to their website by clicking on the betdsi.eu banner at the top of the gruelingtruth.com. I am your co-host for Inside Boxing Daily, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my other co-host, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm good, man. I'm always good when I get to talk some boxing, so let's get it going, man.
All right, so let's start off with a little Triple G, who, according to who listen to, is either the most overrated fighter of all time or one of the greatest fighters of all time. We saw him fight, what is he, 36, 37 now?
37.
My question to you is, did he look old to you? I mean, he sure don't, put it like this, Steve Rolls don't think he feels old, but because he didn't feel old when he hit him in the head. But do you see more deterioration, you think, in the last year since the last Canelo fight?
Yeah, well, I think he looks, just from what I saw, and again, it's kind of hard to gauge because, it was Steve Rolls, but to me, he still looks about the same that he did in the second Canelo fight, and I definitely see some slippage there. I mean, I watched the full Rubio fight earlier because I took some snippets off of it and posted on social media. So he's certainly not the guy he was 5 years ago. He does look older. He's a bit slower. He just doesn't seem like he's as quick to pull the trigger. Obviously the power is still there. And to be honest with you, he's never been the kind of guy who relies on single shots, and I think that's what makes him who he is. I mean, it's part of the reason why he was able to score, 23 knockouts in a row. It's because he didn't rely on single shots. Guys like, Randall Bailey, for instance, who, all he really tried to do was find a right hand. But Golovkin's not that kind of guy, so it seems as if because of that, he still is able to let his hands go, but he's thinking a little bit too much. You know what I mean? It's like you watch guys who used to be fluid and he's just like, there's just a little hesitancy. I don't like it. I mean, I think there were a few things in there that he was trying to do, that he was trying to work on that, probably Jonathan Banks probably had him doing. And he did string together some long combinations, which was nice to see. And you could see that he was, he's pretty fluid with his head movement in the beginning, but it seemed as if as soon as Rolls caught him, Golovkin was like, nah, I don't respect this guy's power. So he just pretty much reverted back to his old ways and, went and cracked him on the top of the head and got the job done. But I definitely see that he's not the guy he was, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. He's not that guy. But to his credit, he's still good enough to compete with the very best in the world.
All right, so are we going to see Triple G against Canelo in September? I would think just because they both have contracts with DAZN, and DAZN wants to maybe get some more subscribers and make a little bit of money, I think that is what we should see. I also think this. I think it's a fight that does need to be made.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I've been looking at, following the fight. Inevitably, there's going to be chatter about a third fight with Canelo Alvarez, and I think that makes sense because that's what everybody seems to think is going to go on because, either Golovkin is ducking Charlo or, Andrade's just sitting on the sidelines. This just seems to make sense. And I understand the criticism. Again, I saw a lot of guys who are hardcore boxing fans, and they're like, honestly, I don't need to see a third fight. Golovkin isn't going to get any better. Alvarez is probably going to. So it seems like the result is set in stone. I think there's a but to that. I mean, I agree with that assessment, but
is there a better option?
Exactly. That's my problem. Do we know there's a better option out there? I mean, Alvarez just beat Daniel Jacobs, who is the next highest rated middleweight in the world. Billy Joe Saunders just fought at 168. There's no telling that he's going to come back down. Charlo is just kind of waiting in the wings, and promotionally, he's not tied to these guys. Demetrius Andrade is, but he's not going to bring in. He's not going to do anything in terms of generate revenue. There are a good number of options that are better than him, and even from the things that he's said and the way he's fought in the past, it just seems like he'd probably get in there and stink up the joint anyways. Like he's made some comments like, "Oh, I just keep my jab in his face all night long." And I'm like, dude, I don't even think you're as good as Lara and maybe even Trout. So I'm not exactly sure what the appeal is there. But again, financially, he just doesn't bring it. So, who else is there? Maybe Callum Smith at 168? Sure, I think that's an option, but I don't think it's going to happen yet. I think that's more in the near future kind of thing. So when you're looking at which opponents would actually give him a stiffer test than Golovkin, I mean, seeing as Jacobs is the next highest rated middleweight, and he wasn't able to give him as tough as a test as even a 36-year-old Golovkin, it seems to indicate to me that these are still the two best middleweights in the world. Of course, we may be proven wrong. Golovkin might be older than we saw because, again, it was Steve Rolls, but just right now it makes the most sense financially and in terms of styles because Golovkin may be older and Alvarez might improve on his performance, but Alvarez is a better fighter when he's fighting somebody like Golovkin, somebody who's bringing the fight to him.
All right, we have a question from the Cisco Kid. I'm not kidding either, but he wants to know, or he thinks that Demetrius Andrade, Jamal Charlo, or Rob Brandt would all kick Triple G's ass right now.
Okay.
We want you to know that that's what would happen. Now, I think this. I think that Triple G would kick the crap out of all three. I know Canelo would kick the crap out of all three also, so I don't really need to see Canelo fight those guys.
Well, here's the thing, is when you say, Andrade and Charlo and Brandt would all kick Golovkin's ass, I mean, you're certainly entitled to that opinion, but, here we like to operate, what's the proof in the pudding? And if Golovkin, by most ringside observers, is still beating Alvarez, who is widely viewed as one of the top 3-4 pound-for-pound best fighters in the world, if Golovkin is still operating on that level, Charlo and Andrade and Rob Brandt's not even in the discussion, in my opinion, but those guys would have to prove that they're operating on that level, and we just haven't seen it, honestly. I mean, I just think you're reading into those things when you're coming to that sort of conclusion, because yes, Golovkin is older, but I really don't see how anybody could see Rob Brandt beating Golovkin. I mean, he's looked rock solid against Murata, who's been a bottom type top 10 guy at best. I mean, he's kind of like a fringe player. Stylistically, he works hard, but he's not particularly fast. He's not particularly quick. I just don't see. I see him getting stopped by Golovkin too. And I think whether or not you disagree with me, I think the point is that the betting odds, right, and the common knowledge would be that Golovkin would whip him. And I think after watching Charlo struggle with an old Matt Korobov, who is not as good as Golovkin either, I think that's a bit telling. Again, I think Charlo would be competitive in that. I think he's a highly skilled operator. I just want to see him against a top-level guy. I mean, who is he actually beating at 160 that indicates that he could hang with a guy like Canelo, Alvarez, or Golovkin? And, and then in terms of Demetrius Andrade, I can't get there either. I mean, I don't think Andrade's as good as Erizlandi Lara. I don't think he's as good as Austin Trout was at his best, at least not so far. And I watched the guy struggle with Jack Colque just last year or the year before?
Yeah, last year, I think. I
mean, if you're struggling with Colque, you're definitely not beating Golovkin, because Golovkin would wreck Colque. And we just saw Sergey Deverenchenko beat Colque in a close fight too. So I'm not sure. I mean, let's see Andrade get past Selecki, who's a pretty good operator himself, and then maybe I'll have better perspective. But the point is Charlo Brandt, none of those guys have competed on the level of Golovkin, and we see that Golovkin is competing at the highest level, even as an old man.
All right, another question from Rob, who says, since Canelo is clearly more willing to take riskier fights than Golovkin, that opens up a lot of great fights for the Mexican star. I think Canelo is interested in fighting these fighters: Callum Smith, Andrade, whatever the hell his name is. I don't even say his name right because I don't really care. I don't think he's that good. Sergey Kovalev or Errol Spence. Now, number one, before you go, let me do this. Since Canelo is clearly more willing to take riskier fights, which is why he took the Golovkin fight once Golovkin turned like 34 or 35 instead of when Golovkin was 31 or 32.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we do have to acknowledge that. Again, Alvarez has a good resume. There's no denying that. But, let's also acknowledge the situation surrounding the Golovkin thing as is. I mean, Golovkin had to wait over 4 years before he got a shot at the middleweight champion of the world. And it wasn't until Alvarez was done, beating Miguel Cotto at 155, beating Amir Khan, lying to everybody, and then moving back down to 154 about, not physically being a – he said he wasn't physically a middleweight, moved down to 154, stopped Liam Smith for some trinket grab. And we see that even Munguia can beat Liam Smith, so that doesn't tell you a whole lot. And then he moved back – then he moved up to 164.5 and fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Okay, so don't get me wrong.
I just had a really funny comment from somebody, but go ahead, then I'll read it to you.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it just seems like, Alvarez was sitting there and dragging this thing out. Even the WBC, who is clearly in love with Canelo Alvarez, stripped him of the belt because they got tired of everybody giving him the runaround. So I don't think it's listen, Alvarez has taken on some good challenges. I give him a lot of respect for taking on Erislandy Lara, who's a tough styles matchup. Yeah, right. He's a skilled boxer. Don't get me wrong. He has taken on some tough tests. But when it's come to Golovkin, it's not as if he fought the man in his prime. And it's not as if he didn't drag it out either. So, pump the brakes just a little bit. But if you're saying, hey, I respect, Alvarez because he's willing to take on the challenges and Golovkin is not, Callum Smith is a good challenge, I think, because of his size. I think he's a damn good technical fighter. I still think there's some question marks surrounding Callum Smith. I mean, yeah, he beat Groves, who was over the hill. I have yet to see him against the best 168-pounders in the world, like, Benavidez. So to me, there's still a little clarity that needs to me, Benavidez looks like the best 160-pounder. And so this is my thing. Callum Smith looks good, but I want to see him against the best, the other best 168-pounders who I know are at the peak of their powers, like Caleb Plant and Benavidez, and then we'll know what kind of challenge he really is. Sergey Kovalev, yeah, there's been talk of it, but is that really an option, in the near future? I don't think so. Is Errol Spence that big of an option? No, I don't think so. And is Errol Spence, what do we even know of Errol Spence at 160 pounds anyways? We
don't know
we just saw
at welterweight, do we?
Yeah, we're not even sure, Errol Spence is the best welterweight in the world. So, and again, we just saw Mikey Garcia move up a traditional weight class and get outboxed. Are we to believe that Errol Spence would make the jump a bit better than Garcia? Maybe. To me, it just seems like you're reading a lot into this as opposed, and is just, I don't know. It's like, does Kovalev represent again, to me, just calling out names like Kovalev and Smith and Spence and all that, Alvarez is fighting the best guys in the world, and I give him credit for that. But, I don't see how you could sit there and say, well, Alvarez is willing to take on the challenges, even though once Golovkin fights Alvarez in the fall, Golovkin's, 4 of his last 6 will have been against 2 of the best middleweights in the world. Again, this is at 34 plus years of age when he started it all. So anybody who says Golovkin's not taking on the challenges, I just think is full of hot air.
All right. let's transition somewhere else. Alexander Usyk will be fighting Carlos Takam. Takam was, I think in his last fight, he was knocked out by Derek Chisora in the 7th or 8th round. Takam's getting up there in age. What do you think about this for a first opponent for Usyk? It was supposed to be the opponent, I think, in May, and it got canceled.
Yeah. Usyk got injured. I think Takam's a good operator. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that he was, should have taken Anthony Joshua the distance. Again, we have to point this out that Takam, he was buzzed in that fight in, what was it, the 11th round, but the referee stepped in too quick. I mean, Takam might have lasted the distance had he been given the green light, but the point is that he should have been given the green light to keep on going. I mean, he really wasn't that hurt. If you watch Takam's fight with Alexander Povetkin, when he got dropped with that big left hook in, I think it was the 10th round, he was done then. But, what Joshua was hitting him with, he was not finished and he was not ready to go. But I still think he's a serviceable fighter. I mean, he was nip and tuck with Chisora, who's good whenever he shows up. So I think this is a fine fight in the beginning. I know a lot of people have given this crap too, like, I don't need to see it. And I think that's fair as well. But we also have to, look at some of the other guys in history and some of the step-ups they took too. I mean, Takam is about the level that a lot of these guys take if they're jumping up from, like
an older heavyweight that has a little bit of a name. I mean, Evander Holyfield's first fight was what? James Quick Tillis?
Yeah.
It was either Quick Tillis or Pinklon Thomas. So both of those guys over the hill.
Yeah, it was someone like that. So I don't think we should be too hard on this. And I think with Ruiz upsetting Joshua, I just think that it just makes his introduction a bit more interesting. I want to see how he does. We'll get to compare it to Joshua and Chisora's performance. I think he's going to win clearly, but I don't really think you can come down hard on the guy. I think he's a serviceable guy. He knows his way around the ropes. He's still got skill. It's a good test. We'll see where he's at, but I reckon he'll come away with a victory there.
All right. Tyson Fury now says he's going to fight 3 times in the next 6 months, and what that tells me, Jeremiah, is he's going to find 2 more guys similar to Tom Schwartz to beat up.
Yeah, because he's talking about taking all these fights before he actually fights Wilder. So I don't think there's any doubt at all that we're going to get some more Tom Schwartz level guys. I mean, they did pass around names like Oscar Rivas. I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that before Wilder, because Rivas technically is a top 10 heavyweight right now, and he's a pretty good fighter relatively, but he's short. I think he's like 6'1", I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 5'11", 6'1", 5'11", 6, 6'1", something like that. I'd have to go look. But he's not a tall guy, and he wasn't great at tracking Bryant Jennings down for most of the fight. I think we could see somebody like Rivas mixed in there. But I think you're right. I think we're going to get a few more Schwartzes in there before it happens. But I would have to credit him. I mean, if he actually fights 3 times or 4 times total in 1 year, that's pretty good for a comeback with a heavyweight. But to me, I don't even care. I personally don't want to see it. I just want to see the Wilder rematch because I'm not. I mean, does he feel that he needs to sharpen his ability up that much before he gets Wilder, or what? Or maybe it's that Wilder already has his next 2 fights lined up. So, Fury's just filling the free time. If that's the case, again, if Wilder's already got, Luis Ortiz 2 and then Konaki early next year, I can't be too mad at Fury fighting guys like that until he gets the rematch. I don't think that's that bad.
All right. Can you think of any other boxing news? Wait, I had a question from Hamed from last show, didn't I?
Yeah, that's right. It was about the YouTuber. Or YouTube credentials, something like that.
Yeah, hold on. Let me pull it up real quick. All right. Where is Hamed? All right. This question is from Hamed. Let me find her here. Okay. How do guys with YouTube channels get credentials to boxing fights? Is boxing the only sport that allows this?
Okay. So I have to be honest, I don't know if it's the only sport that allows this because, boxing is a niche sport. So I suppose it's possible that there are other niche sports
Yeah, like
in which,
rugby or something, they might
yeah,
let you. But I can tell
yeah,
you this, just from experience, um, college basketball, college football, NFL football, NBA basketball, Major League Baseball, NFL, you're not getting in if you just got a YouTube channel.
no, no, that's because there's a centralized governing body, and there's big viewership for all those platforms, and so you need to have serious credentials to get credentialed to a game or something like that. But in boxing, there's no centralized governing body. So what you're doing is you're putting in credentials for the promoters themselves. So if Top Rank has a card, you ask if you can have them. If, Matchroom has one, you ask if you can have them from them. So you're sending them directly to the promoters themselves. So it's not like other sports where there's a governing body, you get in tight or you build a website and whatnot, and it, does huge traffic, and then they recognize you as such. Boxing is just one of those things where sometimes it's about your relationship with a promoter or your content and yada yada. So really, that is coupled with how piss poor the media in boxing is.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
like everything else. Boxing is run worse than any other sport. And we had this conversation today on the Survive and Advance that I do with Steve Risley. And we talked about Zab Judah and what happened to Zab at the age of 41 and stuff. And then Steve brought up why don't boxing have headgear? And then I used well, if you feel safer, you end up taking more shots maybe. Plus, I'll ask you this question, Jeremiah. If Triple G's fighting Canelo, are you watching if they're wearing headgear?
no, I'm not, because they look like amateurs. I mean,
Good, thank you.
yeah, no, I mean, I'm all for. I understand. I'm not all for safety. I'm not going to bullshit anybody because this is. Listen, man, I know a lot of people, like to go on about safety and virtue signal and crap. Listen, I think safety is an important issue. I really do, but I'm also not going to bullshit and act like I'm not a fan because I want to see knockouts. I don't want to see two guys in headgear and the fights are lasted longer just because everybody wants to play it safe and reduce the risk of concussion. I think it's a sport when you sign up and the dangers, and what follows is what follows. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is you will muffle the excitement of the brand if you put headgears on guys and you drag out the fights. People want to see excitement. Boxing is primitive. It appeals to this caveman element in us, and that's why it's one of the most ancient of all sports. There's something raw and real about it, and putting leather headgear on somebody, it just cuts into the entertainment value of the sport. So we've got to learn to balance safety and entertainment, and putting headgear on is just a bullshit way of keeping guys safe. I don't like it. Anyways, I wouldn't watch that. But yeah, it's nobody wants to see that. But yeah, it goes back to the media aspect. Is that the media in boxing it's bad. It honestly is. I mean, the vast majority of people who write about boxing, they a lot of them are just kind of beginners compared to other guys. I mean, most of the positions are not paid, so you're not writing consistently. Most people don't go to journalism school. A lot of people, again, you can just have a YouTube channel. You don't have to write anything. You could just have a YouTube channel. I mean,
How about this? Can I bring up my experience with YouTubers? Um, I,
yeah, yeah.
I I went and I covered credentialed for the grueling truth, the Adrian Broner Adrian Granados fight a couple years ago, and I'm sitting there, and I was sitting I think next to Tiffany Daniels and Eric Lorda, or they were right around. That's when I first met those guys, and I was sitting there, right, and then all of a sudden the chair next to me becomes full by a dude that weighs about 600 pounds. Now, he had a laptop there, but it was almost never open, and he was enormous, and he took up a lot of space. And this dude got to the point where he was taking up like his space and half of my space. And I started talking to him, and he was pretty much, he was just a moron. And I hate to call people out, but his name's Dante. And if you watch it on YouTube, you know who he is. And boxing is full of these guys that really have no clue what they're talking about. They're basically fans of certain fighters, and
Yep.
they have no business sitting ringside at a fight being credentialed media. And this guy had no business sitting there being credentialed media. I mean, he took up about 3 spots. He didn't even really watch the fights most of the time. And when he did, you never saw him type anything. If his laptop it was open, he was watching like a college basketball game or something. And then every once in a while, he'd pull his camera out, film some stuff. Or not his camera, I'm sorry, not his camera, his phone out, and film some stuff. But yeah, YouTubers should not be allowed because for the most part, they're not serious. But I think a lot of these YouTubers, as long as they're the company line for a lot of these places, they're allowed in.
Yeah, I agree. And, I struggle with the idea that, like, can a guy who just does videos, can he, should he be viewed as a legitimate media member? I mean,
Watch
I
the
think,
videos, though. That
well,
should
no,
tell you if he should be legitimate or not.
no, right. Well, that's my thing is like some guys just aren't good writers and maybe they're better in front of camera. So, I mean, my thing is I don't think it's a problem necessarily that you're a YouTuber video maker. Because again, some people are better.
Yeah, some of them are good, but the majority aren't. And they love the ones that aren't in. That's my problem. I shouldn't have said that the way I did. I think there are cases where some should get in. But overall, from my experience, I mean, there was nothing like that when I go work the Notre Dame Navy game or when I go work the NCAA tournament. You don't see people like that. I mean, everybody there at those games, they're working. Where this dude was just kind of chilling out, eating some candy, drinking a pop, filming some stuff every once in a while, and generally just being loud and obnoxious to everybody around him.
Yeah, see, that's my thing is the problem is that most YouTubers, there are some good ones, don't get me wrong, Michael Montero is one of those guys. He's
he
good.
Writes for like Boxing Monthly and the Ring magazine. I don't think he counts.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So and who else do we share? Andrew Sr. I mean, he's not really doing a lot of current topics, but, he presents data in a good fashion. And here's my thing is, if you are, good behind a mic or, you're good in front of a camera and you try to be objective and, you present real value to fans, I don't have a problem with you being credentialed to fights. Again, some people just operate better in that medium, and I don't think that's a problem. But the issue is, and what you're pointing to, is that the majority of YouTubers who are doing boxing are opinionated and, they've got their clear biases. I mean, the shit is coming out of their eyes, and it's like, they're like you said, they're towing the party line, and they're just making no effort at all to conceal who they like and who they don't like. And so, yeah, there's certainly guys like, Dante's Boxing Nation and I don't know, some of the others, 7-8 Sports or whatever. I don't know. I don't really follow some of the guys. So I'm not that in tune with the YouTube boxing scene that much because, again, there are a few guys that are actually giving me real value when I watch them. But, again, I don't have a problem with them being credentialed if they're very good at what they do.
Yeah, but at least Dante's not. And Dante, if you're listening, I apologize. I don't really, because he's also a little arrogant. That was mean, huh? He's a lot bigger than me, though, so if nothing else, I can run away to him until he gets tired and falls down. All right, what do you want to talk about on this day?
On this day, I guess we're going with a one I think a lot of you would like, and it's Tommy Morrison versus Razor Ruddock. This was obviously a damn good fight. Um, Morrison was. I watched the fight before I came on, and oh God, what was I? Lost my train of thought there. But yeah, Razor Ruddock early in the fight. I think it was 2 minutes and 4 seconds into the fight. Razor Ruddock dropped Tommy Morrison with a nice uppercut. Didn't really hurt him too bad, however. Morrison got up. He got his wits about him pretty quickly. Um, he continued to box behind his jab. And I think this fight went into the 6th round.
Yeah.
And what happened was Razor Ruddock, he caught Morrison and stunned him a little bit, went in for the kill, and caught that huge left hook coming in, which dropped him like a sack of potatoes.
Was he dropped or was it 2 standing 8 counts? Because I remember he got like 2 or 3 standing 8 counts in his fight, didn't he? Like round 2 and round 6.
Yeah, but the hook that I was referring to did drop him, right? Remember, because it was when I hit him with the left hook, he was kind of like sprawled out, where it looked like his right leg was under his body or something.
Yeah. I think Ron Lipton was the referee too. I'm friends with him on Facebook. We ought to try to get him on sometime.
Yeah, we should, because Ron's a historian, man. I've seen him comment on some of Steve Lott's stuff and things like it, and I could just tell that his knowledge from like the 50s and 60s is up there, because I don't know a lot of guys who know a bunch about the immediate post-World War period, except maybe Sugar Ray Robinson. But yeah, he looks like he follows that area pretty closely, and he does a good job too. I mean, whenever I see him on PBC or something, he looks like he's doing a rock solid job of reffing.
Yeah, and we go back to Morrison now. And I think that he's a guy that's extremely underrated. I think he'd been the heavyweight champion today easily. He would have smacked Deontay Wilder right in the damn mouth. And actually, he fought Joe Hip, and Joe Hip reminds me a little of Andy Ruiz.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, well, he's a fat guy.
Yeah.
Let's see. But, of course, Morrison was hot. He was in Rocky V. I think that was in 1990. Right after that, his biggest fight against Merciless Ray Mercer. Everybody remembers that. He dominated Mercer for 4 rounds until he almost got killed. He had the life and death battle with Joe Hip. I think I remember watching that on ABC Sports too. But that was a great fight. And then another great fight that he was in was Carl the Truth Williams in 1993, which was on HBO. I think it was the undercard of a George Foreman fight, which led us to George Foreman versus Tommy Morrison, which was on this day, on the 7th. Why did we bring this up on the 7th?
I don't know. Did we? No, I thought we did.
I don't know. But he beats him. But then you get Tim Tomacek. Have you ever seen the Tim Tomacek fight? You know the story, right?
Maybe.
Okay, Tomacek was a dude that... do you remember Mike Williams? I think Mike got stopped by like Carl the Truth Williams or something in the 7th round, or Buster Douglas on the undercard to Tyson Spinks. But the interesting thing about Mike Williams is Mike Williams was Union Kane in Rocky V. And Mike Williams was a dude that looked like a serious fighter, but he didn't really fight like one because he couldn't take a punch that well. So what you had was... they were supposed to fight each other. It was supposed to be Morrison's first defense. I think, was this in the Kemper Arena? I think it was in Kansas City. And Mike Williams, Union Kane, in the movie is supposed to fight Tommy Morrison, who, of course, was Tommy Gunn in the movie. So it was a cool setup. Now, the only problem was Mike Williams refused to leave his dressing room and fight. And what happened was Tom Tomacek was sitting in the crowd. I think the old story was he was even drinking a beer.
What the hell?
Yeah, and he was a professional boxer. I mean, not necessarily a great one, but I think his final record was like 53-12. I don't even know if he fought anybody really of any note. I think that he lost on points to France Botha, and I think that was maybe right after this fight. And I think he lost to guys like Johnny Duploy, who Johnny was a good fighter. He was a decent fighter. But basically, Tom Tomacek comes out of the crowd to fight on ESPN for Morrison's WBO heavyweight title. And he made it into the fourth round, and Morrison won all the rounds, pretty much dominated the fight. But I always found that an intriguing story. And then, of course, you got Ross Purity, who we were talking beat, Vladimir Klitschko early in his career, or Vitaly? I know it was one of them. We talked about it the other day. Was it Vladimir?
Yeah, it was Vladimir. It was, I think, 11th round.
Yeah.
TKO.
Yeah, and he fought Tommy Morrison to a draw. So Morrison lost a lot of momentum. He got that momentum back with this Ruddock fight, which then led to the Lennox Lewis fight, which did not end well for Tommy. You've seen the Lewis fight, haven't you?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. That was actually Lennox Lewis about as good as I ever saw him tell.
Yeah, no, he whipped Morrison. That wasn't. I think I preferred Michael Grant's performance over Tommy Morrison's. Yeah, Lewis was real sharp that night, but I mean, to Morrison's credit, he was damn good against Ruddock. I mean, I liked what I saw. I mean, like you said, I think he's underrated, and I think that's partly because most people generally focus on the top rung of the ladder in any given era. So, it's like all about Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield. And don't get me wrong, those guys deserve all the accolades that are given to them. But, Morrison it's like he outboxed George Foreman. And again, George Foreman deserves all the credit, because, again, of what he was able to accomplish. But, the Morrison that night and the Morrison of the Ruddock fight, I mean, the Morrison of the Ruddock fight was very similar to the one in the Foreman fight. I mean, he was moving, he was jabbing, he was throwing combinations. I mean, he was quick. Again, he got caught in the first round, but he wasn't seriously hurt. He got his bearings back quickly, and he continued to box pretty effectively. I mean, Ruddock, to me, it's like when we're talking about all these old heavyweights and some of the stuff that I've seen lately, it's like when I was watching damn it, who was it? Trevor Berbick, for instance, when I was watching him versus St. Gordon not long ago. I mean, when I watch Berbick and I compare him to Ruddock, I thought, again, just from what I've seen, I'm not as familiar with the era as you are, but, to me, Ruddock struck me as a better fighter, and he was quality.
Who?
I mean, he was...
Then Berbick?
Yes, Ruddock struck...
I think they were kind of similar. I mean, Razor Ruddock, to me, was terrible. Razor Ruddock he threw one punch at a time continuously. That's all he did. He was a one-trick pony. If you watch him fight Tyson, he actually, if he could have thrown a combination, I think he would have beat Mike Tyson in the second fight. But when I watched Razor Ruddock, I mean, it was just one punch at a time. He had a huge hook. If he hit you with it, he could knock anybody out.
Wasn't as good as Morrison's, though.
No, it wasn't near as good as Morrison's, and Morrison was technically a much better boxer. And when Tommy Morrison wanted to be great, he was. I mean, the Tommy Morrison against Carl the Truth Williams, have you ever seen that fight?
Nope.
Watch
Can't say I have.
It is a great fight.
Yeah. And Williams, I mean, I'm most familiar with because of his good performance against Larry Holmes. I mean, the dude had like an 85-inch reach, good jab. But I mean, the Morrison, we're talking about the Ruddock fight and you talk about how good his hook was. Yeah, and it was good, but Morrison was just quicker. It was just snappier. It was more powerful. I mean, that's what happened in the sixth round is, what was it, like a minute and something in? Ruddock ran into a beautiful left-hand shot, and that's exactly what happened is like he fell to the ground and his arm kind of like rolled in a way, and he kind of like fell on, it almost looked like he fell on his leg.
Let me give you this real quick. Do you remember David Jaco?
David Jaco.
He got knocked out by like everybody that was anybody in the heavyweight division. And the thing was, David Jaco actually beat Razor Ruddock in like Razor Ruddock's 10th fight. Conroy Nelson, another guy that, Tyson and everybody else beat up. He won a 10-round decision. He won a split decision over Mike Weaver, which I think this was the first time I remember ever watching him. This was an older Weaver, 1986. Weaver was still a good fighter, but he won a split decision. It was really close, and I'm not real sure that Razor won it. And then you go up, there's almost nothing on Razor's record. And then he beats James Broad in 1988. James Broad was done by then, if he ever existed to begin with. Then he knocks out James Bone Clutcher Smith in 1989. And then the thing that really got him to Tyson fight was he knocked out Michael Dokes with a devastating hook. I mean, he beat the shit out of Dokes. Knocked him out in the 4th round. And then after that, he comes out and he beat like Camille Odom and Mike Rouse, who were basically journeyman guys. Then he gets the Tyson fights. And he loses by a 7th round stoppage that was stopped way too soon by Richard Steele. Then he loses the decision to Tyson. After that, you get a win against an old Greg Page. And then he fights Lennox Lewis, and Lennox Lewis destroys him in 2 rounds. Morrison destroys him in 6, and that is pretty much it for Razor Ruddock. I mean, he had like a 10 or 12 fight winning streak after that against basically nondescript guys that were all with double-digit losses, or almost all of them. And then he loses his last fight in 2015, Jeremiah, to Dylan Carmen, who was 8-2. So I think that people read way too much into beating up Michael Dokes. And I think this was Dokes after Holyfield had beat him up in that great fight. And Dokes did look like he was back. But when you look at this, I mean, there's not much of the way it wins here. And I think really that people expected him to give Lennox Lewis problems because he gave Mike Tyson problems. But Lennox Lewis blasted his ass out in 2 rounds. Then he took 2 years off, beat a guy by the name of Anthony Wade, took another year off, and Morrison beat his ass. So really, have you seen, I mean, go watch some Razor Ruddock fights. There is no nuance to Razor Ruddock.
Yeah, I believe you. Well, I mean, I found it interesting, too. I actually just hopped on and looked at Razor Ruddock's record, and
It's not impressive.
Well, it's funny because he beat Ribalta, and then he beat Harold Sconiers by split decision. And Sconier, this was back in 2001, and he beat Sconiers, who is the Deontay Wilder boogeyman. He knocked Deontay Wilder down. It's funny, man, because I saw Errol Spence tweet after the Anthony Joshua loss, and he was like, "Yeah, Joshua don't want none of Wilder," and I'm just like, all right, well, take it easy. All these guys are susceptible, and then people are jumping on my ass like, oh well, is Wilder losing? Was he ever knocked down? I'm like, yeah, he was knocked down by Harold Sconiers, motherfuckers. I mean, just go Google it.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, go Google it.
You can't Google it. You can't. I had a couple. You can read about it. You just can't see it.
Yeah. Exactly. I think there's some still photos that you can find, but
there is. And he looks pretty messed up on the knockdown too. If you get it, look like he's about to go through the ropes.
Well, and again, there was there's contemporary, there's firsthand knowledge of that fight. I mean, Douglas Fisher was there, and he said, Wilder was real messed up after
he got saved by the bell.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, like, I was telling people that Harold Sconier or Wilder's has been down, and people are like, okay, you're going back to the amateurs. I'm like, no, he was knocked down as a pro, man. It's like, do your homework, right? It's like, it's not necessarily about being a Deontay Wilder hater. It's about doing your homework and knowing what's what, So, it's just funny, because all these guys are susceptible. But yeah, he beat Harold Sconiers in a split decision. And then he, after he won the Canadian heavyweight title, he took almost 14 years off, and then came back. Jesus, man, must have really fallen on hard times.
Just like Tyson Fury, he was still the Canadian heavyweight champion.
Yeah, he's Laniel.
Laniel, and yeah, he's the Laverne and Shirley song. Did you ever watch Laverne and Shirley?
Nah, it's a little before me.
It doesn't matter. So's the Andy Griffith Show. You've never seen Andy Griffith?
I think when I was young, my grandmother used to play, because I lived a good number of years with my grandmother, so I'm pretty sure I saw some of it back then. I think, what was it, Gilligan's Island as well.
Well, Gilligan's Island, stupid. I don't know what the hell you're doing watching that, but all right.
MASH.
Uh,
Also, MASH was on.
I watched MASH. All right. Anything else we want to talk about before we wrap it up?
Man, what did I see? Let me see. I couldn't think anything off the top of my head. It seems like it's been a bit slow day. Of course, some of it's cleared up because there's that big, all those Zab Judah rumors that were thrown about, like bleeding of the brain and he was in a coma, and then finally we had some official reports, and he had a minor bleed of the brain, and he was actually
Dude, I
doing all
don't think
right.
there's such a thing as a minor bleed in your brain.
Yeah, well,
The only time it's a minor bleed in the brain is when it's somebody else's brain and not yours.
Yeah. Oh, so
Kind of like getting a minor concussion. Ain't nothing
No.
minor about anything like that. But
Yeah.
so he is doing good now.
Yeah. He's been released to the hospital, and I guess his prognosis is good. But yeah, it just wasn't as serious as some people. It's funny. I was actually watching a little bit of Michael Montero tonight, and he was talking about how there were actually some YouTubers who were getting on, and they were crying. They were like, "Pray for my man," and I hope he's doing
I bet
okay.
one of them
And
was
I'm like,
Dante.
oh yeah, he probably was, right? Yeah.
Oh, hell. All right, Jeremiah, we're going to wrap it up then. We will be back tomorrow night at 11 o'clock Eastern. Make sure you go check out betdsi.eu. Put in the promo code TGT. Most importantly, go check out the Retired Boxers Foundation with Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos. They do great work over there helping out retired boxers. So make sure you check them out on Facebook. You can hear all our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find sports podcasts. You'll find The Grueling Truth. So, for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.